Good afternoon and a warm welcome to all Radley students and parents and any school partners who have joined us today on Zoom. My name's Caroline Monaghan and I'm responsible for our new Beyond Radley Career Speaker Programme, a series of talks designed to give you a live insight into the world of work. Over the coming weeks, we'll bring you a variety of speakers from the Radley Network who help you to better understand the types of careers available to you and the early steps into those careers. We'll also bring in speaker experts who'll talk to you about the transferable business skills that you will need to develop to help you move between jobs and careers in the future. We aim to run 3 of these Beyond Radley career talks a week for the next 4 weeks, and then it's likely the programme will continue longer term as part of our careers offering. Now, I'm shortly going to hand you over to Charlie, but before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. Please keep your microphones on mute throughout the event to avoid interruptions from Amazon deliveries or dogs. If you want to ask a question during the talk, then please type it into the chat and I'll direct it to Charlie, but there will also be a Q&A at the end where you can ask questions via the chat as well. Finally, I need to let you know that this event will be recorded for use on our website, so we can share this with those who are unable to attend today. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Charlie Goodwin, old Radleyan. He left Radley in 2010 and went to Durham University to study economics. Following on from that, he did his law conversion course and then started as a trainee solicitor at Simmons & Simmons in London. After 2 years, he's now qualified and he's now an associate in their dispute resolution team. Charlie's experience means he's very well placed to talk about the early pathway to becoming a lawyer, how competitive it really is, and what steps you can take to succeed. He's also a keen hockey player and heads up the old Radleyan hockey team known as the Galleons. So Charlie, I'm going to hand over to you now. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Caroline. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. Hopefully that introduction gave you a little bit of a background as to me, and I will go over sort of more my routine. And the way I sort of envisage this talk going is I'll talk you through a little bit about what being a lawyer in England and Wales is like, and sort of different paths you can go down. Talk a little bit more about my route into law, which went not in a straight line, to say the least. There were a few bumps along the way and a few different turns that have got me to where I am today. And then at the end of that, hopefully we can, if you've got any questions, we can run through those. So I'm just going to share my screen now, and hopefully everyone will be able to see these slides here. Caroline, can you see those just to double check? Brilliant. I think you're on mute, but that was there. Excellent. So quickly, just to run through, in England and Wales, which is the jurisdiction which those 2 countries sit in, there are 2 types of lawyers, and I apologise to anyone who already knows this, but I think it's really important just to set this out before we start. Now, the 2 types are solicitors and barristers. Now, for those who have no idea, if you've ever watched a TV program and you've seen a lawyer wearing a silly wig, they are usually barristers. In actual real life, barristers very rarely wear wigs. It's sort of seen as a bit of a no-no amongst barristers, which is quite an interesting one. So we have 2 types, as I say, solicitors and barristers. So starting with solicitors, they are the sort of, to use a medical term, they are the sort of GPs within the law world. So they carry out the day-to-day work with a client, and they work directly from the start of any matter you might work on. Because of this, they can be involved in although you specialize, you can be involved in a wider variety of matters. And the reason for this is because solicitors do contentious and non-contentious work. Now, for those who don't know, contentious is effectively where people are fighting with each other. So for example, if you have a contract where someone says, I will do this, and they don't eventually do that, and the other side goes, well, hold on, you didn't do that, let's have a fight about it. That's where the contentious work comes in for lawyers. And then on the other side of this, they also do non-contentious work, which is things like advice. So if you're buying a house, a solicitor would give you advice on how to buy your house and what to look out for and the different searches, through to if you have a company and one company wants to sell they're being sold, and another one wants to buy them, you have solicitors working on either side of the deal there to make it happen. So obviously in that case, you're not fighting, you're working together. And the big difference between solicitors and barristers is you work as a solicitor, you work as part of a team. So I'm a solicitor, so I work for, as Caroline said, a firm called Simmons and Simmons. And you sort of, when you're working on a legal matter, there's probably about 3 or 4 of you working together on the matter. Now, moving on to barristers, as I said, they're the ones on TV you see wearing the wigs, and they stand up in court. I mean, that is the big real difference. Although solicitors can, barristers do all the advocacy work. So they're the ones who stand up and they will argue your case within a court to a judge. So because of that, they have to possess specialist knowledge. So going back to my medical analogy, they are sort of the specialist surgeons. So they're sort of the heart surgeon or the brain surgeon or whatever. So they have real specialist knowledge. They actually work independently. So they're all just work for themselves, so self-employed. But that being said, on the really big cases you work on, you will have probably a selection of barristers working with you, normally 2 or 3, at different levels of seniority. And they actually work as a team, even though they are individuals in themselves. And as I mentioned, predominantly they do the contentious work. That's their skill set. They stand up in court and they can argue. But because they do have some specialist knowledge, occasionally they will advise on non-contentious work. For example, you have some barristers who are tax barristers, and they will know lots about that area of law, so they can advise on a deal where, for example, a company is being sold and they want some specialist tax advice. So just looking at routes into law for those who are interested, before I go on to talk about my route. It's very straightforward, actually. So imagine lots of the people who signed into this are still, well, I assume still Radley or other schools at a similar level up to 18. So might be or may not be thinking about what they do in the future. And the great thing about law is you don't have to study law at any stage at school or university to be able to go into a career of law. Now, as you'll see, there are 2 routes. So if you do study, if you really want to study law, and it's a very good degree, you can go study your law degree at university, and then you go as a barrister, as it says on the left-hand side there, you go straight into your barrister's training course, the BTC. This is essentially a year-long course where you get specialist training from occasionally practicing barristers, but usually sort of retired barristers who've gone into teaching, and they will give you the relevant skills that you need to be able to go. Now, and then you get called to the bar, which is effectively your final exam before you finish your law school stage. You do a pupillage, which is sort of a 2-year-long work experience, and at the end you qualify and hopefully get a job within the chambers. Now, if you don't do law, and this accounts for anyone, if you want to be a barrister or a solicitor, you have to do a 1-year conversion course, which is called the Graduate Diploma in Law. Now, effectively, in this 1 year, they take a non-law graduate and they turn them into a sort of a similar standard and level as someone who's done 3 years of law. Now, obviously, that sounds pretty tough, putting 3 years into 1 year. And just to state now, that's not what actually happens. They effectively take the key modules that you would study on a law degree and cram it into 1 year. So you don't touch on a lot of this sort of ethics behind law, or you don't dive really into the sort of the academia behind case law and precedent and all this sort of stuff that you might pick up when you start. I'm as Caroline said, a non-law graduate, so I had to do the GDL. And whilst it was a very tough year, I don't think, having come out the other side, you lose anything from not doing law at university and going to career of law. So just to compare that to if you go down the solicitor route, here, non-law degree, again, you study the GDL and then you come out the other side. And there's a difference, your second year or your first year post a law degree at university is something called the legal practice course. But actually, I had to quickly check this before I put these slides together, because that is about to change, and it's about to change to the solicitor's qualifying exam. Now, unfortunately, I don't know too much about that, but I've heard rumblings that it's basically the same course, just slightly updated for modern day times. So that again is either a 6-month or a 1-year course, depending on whether you've got a training contract or not, which I'll come on to. And then once you've done that, you then start your training contract. Now, a training contract for a solicitor is a 2-year work experience, so to speak, with a law firm. Usually within that, you do rotations around different departments, so you get a different experience as to the different areas of law. And after your 2 years, you then qualify as a solicitor, or going back to the barrister, you qualify as a barrister. So hopefully that whirlwind has kind of given you a bit of an understanding as to the 2 routes to go down if you want to pursue a law career in England and Wales. For those who are wondering why I keep saying England and Wales, as I mentioned at the start, that's the jurisdiction. If you're in Ireland or Scotland, it's slightly different, same as if you were in the US or France or any of those different jurisdictions. They just have slightly, well, obviously they've got different laws, but they have slightly different ways of qualifying. So moving on to sort of talking about my journey. So, and I think this is probably the main reason for this chat now, is just to give you some understanding how I've gone from leaving Radley to where I am now. And as I mentioned before, there was a few blips along the way. I haven't sort of followed that straight route in as my slides before have shown. So just to run you through it, I left Radley in 2010. I had a year out where I did some sort of usual gap year work, and then a bit of traveling down to Australia to watch the Ashes, and then on from there, which was great fun. I then started Durham University in 2011 studying economics. That was a 3-year course. And whilst I was there, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I studied economics because I enjoyed it at Radley. I thought I needed to do a good degree, but I had no idea, apart from further afield, what I wanted to do. So I thought economics was a great grounding, and it's something you can apply to everything. And whilst I was at Durham, I started to think about career paths I wanted to do. And obviously one of the ones I thought about with an economics degree was finance. And I started looking into that, and actually I wasn't that interested in it. I then thought about doing sports marketing, did some work experience in sports marketing, again, realized as much as I love my sport, it wasn't for me. And then it was sort of a chance encounter with a friend who told me to consider law, that I started to really look into it. And one of the best bits of advice I was given is, and for anyone who's considering a career is, and not sure what they want to do now, is 1, don't rush it. You've got plenty of time, especially in this day and age where people can move around careers. But the second one was that in every deal that's done, you need an accountant and a lawyer. And whilst I wasn't sure whether I wanted to be an accountant, my brother was an accountant. I thought it was a bit boring, if I'm honest, from listening to his life. So I veered into law. And in some respects, I was very lucky that I've sort of stumbled into an area that I actually really enjoy. And in others, it's just dumb luck, really. So having sort of spent some time at university getting to know some people and talk to some people, I put together some work experience and decided I want to go and do law. So I applied to do my GDL, my conversion course, and I did that for a year in 2014 to 15. And whilst I was on that, I was applying for training contracts at different law firms. Now, I probably sent out close to 50 applications over the course of 2 years to law firms. I think probably about 25 of those were just completely wrong, because I didn't understand the process that goes into applying to law firms and the sort of game you have to play. And so hopefully we can cover a bit of that today on, I know it's a long way off for a lot of people, but it is an incredibly competitive process, but there are some certain things you can do that can really help. But it took me a bit of time to really get my straps and get my applications up to the standard they should be. And I think a lot of that has to do because I took a long time to settle on law as my career that I wanted to do. So for those on this call, it's great that you're considering it, or after this, you might completely disregard it because of what I've said. No hard feelings if that's the case. So like I said, I got to the end of my GDL and I didn't have a training contract yet. So I took the decision to have a year out in between my law studies, and I went and became a paralegal at Baker McKenzie law firm in London in their intellectual property team. Now, for those who are wondering what a paralegal is, if you watch Suits, it's what Meghan Markle was, and it's nothing like that in real life. It's essentially you are an assistant to the lawyers within a department, and it's a great job if you want to get really good experience post-university for a career in law. It doesn't come with all the pressure of being a lawyer. You can take on as much or as little as you want until you feel confident to. And it gives you an amazing exposure to the inner workings of a law firm. And for me, I found that incredibly useful, especially when it came to doing my applications. It also helped that Baker McKenzie is renowned for being one of the top intellectual property teams in the world. They have clients such as Facebook, Google, Twitter, etc. I appreciate a few of them have all amalgamated now, so they're all one company. But so that really helped me. I didn't actually realize that when I applied to it, so I had to quickly realize, do my research before my interview. And whilst I was doing my paralegal in 2015, I managed to get a vacation scheme at Simmons and Simmons. Now, a vacation scheme is a weeks-long interview, effectively, at a law firm. You go in for 5 days, you get embedded into a department, and they effectively give you talks, pieces of work, events to attend, sort of side interviews to do, and by this process, they try to work out whether they want to employ you or not. They do say that it's a two-way thing where you're supposed to interview the firm and they're supposed to interview you, but in all honesty, it's more of a one-week interview for you. So I managed to get onto the Simmons and Simmons one in 2015, and on the back of that, I secured my training contract. So following that, 2016, I went on to do my legal practice course, which is the 1-year solicitor's course. And then I started my training contract with Simmons and Simmons in March 2018. As I mentioned, a training contract is 2 years, and at Simmons and Simmons we do 4 rotations. So my rotations were, I was in the banking department, so predominantly the work there is putting together loans or financing agreements. I then went into dispute resolution, which is where I am now, within the insurance and construction team. I then sat in the corporate team, which looks at M&A, asset management, and funds type work. And then I did a secondment where I essentially what the firm do is they send you out to one of their clients for 6 months, and you sit within their legal team and help there. So I went to NatWest Markets, which is the investment bank side of NatWest that you see on the high street. And then in March 2020, I qualified into the insurance and construction team at Simmons and Simmons, and then COVID came. So it's been an interesting first year for me, but that is my route into law. So yeah, Caroline, I think we've got a few questions that you wanted to ask. Is that right?
Yes, well, first of all, if anybody wants to ask a question of Charlie, then please feel free to do so via the chat, or you can virtually put your hand up as well. I don't mind if you want to direct something to him. So yeah, just a couple of questions from me. I'm interested to know what you think the characteristics or qualities are that you need to be a lawyer. What sort of person makes a good lawyer?
Well, I don't know how many of these I have, but I'll give you the ones that you're sort of told that you need. So the first one, and whenever you apply to a law firm or when you're within a law firm, the one that always gets thrown at you and always it's reiterated to you nonstop is attention to detail. Now, what we do as lawyers is effectively we are there to help our clients achieve what they have already decided they want to achieve. So if I use the example as if you're an entrepreneur and you've set up your own business and you want to sell it, you've probably already made the decision that you want to sell your business, and you've probably agreed a price with the person you're going to sell it to. Now, where lawyers come in is they make sure that they take what you've agreed and what you want to achieve, and they make it into a legally binding contract for sale, essentially. So what you need to do is make sure that you cover everything, so that at the end of the deal, when your client sells their company, for example, you haven't missed anything. You haven't suddenly gone, oh, we didn't think about the fact that you've got 4 people who work for you. We haven't thought about their contracts and what they're going to do, or anything like that. Or we haven't spotted something that if you didn't know existed, you might not sell the company, etc. So the first thing is attention to detail, and it, like I say, it gets boring how often you hear it. It's something you hear no matter how senior you get within your career, and it's something you just got to constantly work at. So if you are worried about your attention to detail, do not worry. It gets drilled into you, and it's one of those things that you just got to keep working at. The next one is commercial awareness. Again, a real key word with any interview, no matter what sort of career you want to go into, but especially within law, because despite the fact that you're there to provide legal advice, you also needed to provide your client with commercial advice, because all of your legal decisions will be based within a commercial decision. Now, for those who are wondering what the hell is commercial awareness, as I was very much when I left Radley, it's essentially knowing what the hell is going on in the world that we all live in. And the majority of it, they say, oh, read the Financial Times, but I mean, that's just a real gimmicky answer as well. So commercial awareness is effectively knowing that if you act for, let's use, Man United, let's say you act for them, it's knowing the sort of football world commercially, in knowing that, for example, Nike are going to sponsor this team, Adidas are going to sponsor this team, Puma are going down the drain and they've lost loads of teams, so they're going to lose a load of money, to knowing that the FA are going to bring in a new regulation around you're not able to high-five each other after a goal, to things such as, I'm just trying to think of a few others here. But the other one is, if you're working for a rugby team, for example, you might have a look at what's going on at the moment with concussion. So it's kind of just knowing the story around the background. And most people have sort of a commercial awareness in other areas of their life. If you support, sorry to bang on with a sports analogy, but if you support a team, you know who they might be about to sign in the summer, when their coach is going to be sacked, whether they're going to finish in the top four of the league. It's that awareness, but within a business world. So it's the sort of holistic approach. And that is basically commercial awareness. And how you build that is essentially just taking an interest in the area. And so it is reading. And that's why most people say the Financial Times, but that is not the only place you can go. There are lots of really good places, starting with, the BBC website. Just go on their business page and have a browse to reading a good newspaper. So maybe stay away from The Sun. It probably won't give you too much, but keep to maybe the Times or something like that. And through to the Financial Times, but also, if people are on Twitter, you can use some great, if you create your account well, you can follow some really good journalists and get some information there to sort of bring it back to a law context, law specific publications that you can use. So that's a really good way to build a commercial awareness. I suppose the third one is just having a bit of an analytical side. So like to problem solve, enjoy the challenge of going through information, working through the rubbish to come to a good, solid position, and just being able to sort of get to the key facts. Law you're in, they are the key skills you need. If you're going to give very good advice, and it comes with practice. And when you go through your law degree, or you have to do the conversion course, and then through the LPC, that is what they will instill in you, and they will teach you skills. But if you have it now, it's a great thing to have.
That's brilliant, Charlie. We've actually got a lot of great questions coming through on the chat now. Mr. Pullen wanted to know, in your storytelling about your paralegal application, what was it in the end that made your application stand out, do you think?
It's a very good question. I think within, with every job you have to go for now, everyone's got really good academics. So the fact that you've got straight A's or 2 A's and a B or whatever it may be, it's sort of, everyone should strive for those, but everyone should remember that they are sort of the standard, unfortunately, the world we live in now. So you do need to distinguish yourself. Now, I'd like to say that it was my work experience, or that it was, as I say, my academic results or my sporting interests, but actually, it is a slightly odd one. But when I was at law school, I became a professional babysitter, which, to the great joy of my friends, gave me a lot of chat about that. But I actually put that down on my CV because I put that and the fact that I was a darts player at university as well. And they were, fun enough, the things that made me stand out, despite the fact that they're probably useless for my career. And in my Baker McKenzie interview, I was interviewed by a female partner who had 2 young children, and she saw it and she was like, "Tell me about this." And I fortunately had a couple of good anecdotes that I decided to tell her. One involved changing a nappy, which I'd never done before, and she was, I think, quite shocked that I'd done that. But she seemed to remember it, because 3 months into the job, we were walking from a meeting together, and she asked me to tell another partner about the story. So I suppose the moral of that story is, try and make your CV as colorful try and make it the gold standard. So really good academics, good experience as you can. But then don't be afraid to throw in a few interests in the air. The reason I mentioned the darts one is because actually in another interview, I got asked by a partner about my darts career at university, which was very fleeting, to say the least. But we then had a half-an-hour chat about darts, which was a lot more interesting and easy to talk about than how to structure a deal or what I thought about the financial world at that moment in time. So I suppose that probably wasn't the answer that everyone was looking for, but I suppose make sure people will have good grades, they'll have good experience. So don't go over the top. I wouldn't say put in every colorful thing you do, but don't be afraid to throw in a couple of little gems in there, because at the end of the day, people will be interviewing hundreds, if not thousands, of people for positions within law. And if they can have a conversation about something that's not, tell me about why you studied X at university or why you did this experience, then you're going to be the better for it.
No, absolutely. People want to see humanity and connect with real people, not robots. So I think that's a really good point. So another question here. You mentioned the difference between being a solicitor and a barrister, but what about other areas of work in law, such as consultancy, especially with regards to qualifications? Can you comment on that?
Consultancy, I'm just trying to understand. So I think my understanding of consultants is that they're not within law. I do have a few mates who are consultants, and they would normally be based sort of from an advisory role. Outside of that, they won't be providing the legal advice that the lawyer will provide on a deal. They might provide advice to the clients on how to roll out a product, if that's what they're doing, or how to, once they've bought a business, how they can then jumpstart it and follow it into their business or integrate it with their business, etc. But in terms of within law, there aren't consultants, so to speak, doing the legal work. You might, as I say, you might have interaction with consultants. For example, if you're doing a real estate transaction, you might have a consultant that is a structural engineering expert who will deal with that side of the deal. But in the day-to-day legal aspects will be dealt with by a solicitor, and then a barrister will advise if that's needed, and then will advise on the contentious work. If that's what the question means, okay. That's what I got.
Thank you. Well, the person who wrote the question, if you want to elucidate on that further, then let us know. Another one here: is there a significant difference for the employer in terms of having a degree in jurisprudence or having a conversion from another course?
No. Simple answer: no. I work with probably 50-50 split. I didn't, as I say, I didn't do law, and I would say, unless you have a real desire to do law, don't do a law degree. And that's just my opinion, so please don't take it from me. But I would just say that it's as I mentioned, it's not vitally important. It doesn't hold you back at all. I think if you really want to get into the academia of law, then maybe do a law degree. I think that's one thing. But once you've done the conversion course in your LPC, everyone's at the same level. You've probably just had a bit more fun at university, if I'm honest, because law degrees are quite intense. But that's just me speaking from my experience of doing economics. I do, like I say, I work with probably 50% law graduates and 50% not, and I don't think you could probably tell the difference between either of them. So it's very much a personal choice for whoever's making that decision. But in terms of employers, no, not at all. And that is actually something that they will tell you, and they try to sort of make sure that's the case. At the end of the day, they want good lawyers, whether you've studied law or not.
Okay, thank you. Another question here. Do most people who do the GDL already have a training contract, or do people do it speculatively?
Good question. It's a mixture. It really is a mixture. I didn't have a training contract, and actually I was in a class with no one who did. Most do. I think the big thing to say is it's not, how do I put this? The GDL and the LPC are expensive courses to do, especially after university. So it is a big financial commitment. And if you have a training contract, your law firm will pay for you to go through those two years. I was fortunate that I was able to fund myself through, and then got the training contract, so didn't have to pay for the second year. So it is very much a sort of personal decision. Some law firms will retrospectively pay for your year. So if you get a training contract, they will back pay you for your fees for that year. So that's a good one. So it really is a decision for the person who's taking it as to whether or not they want to take that on. Obviously, I appreciate some won't be in the same position that I was in, but as I say, some firms will pay you back, and others unfortunately don't. But it doesn't hold you back in any sense. Even if you don't go and do the GDL, you can still apply for training contracts having finished university. If you're doing work experience elsewhere, or you're working another job, whatever that may be, it won't hold you back from applying for a training contract and then just starting the year after, for example.
Great, thank you. We've got someone here who's looking for the inside track, which is probably all useful for all of the students. My sister, who is at Durham, is going through applying for summer vacation schemes at the moment, and has to do a job simulation and behaviour test for Simmons & Simmons tonight. Do you have any tips?
Well, I have never heard of a job simulation and behavioural test at Simmons & Simmons, so I can't give you any tips. I'm really sorry. The only thing I can say is that Simmons & Simmons is a great firm. They love people who went to Durham as well, so there's a tick in the box there. But apart from that, no, sorry, I haven't heard that they were doing that. I imagine that's very much a COVID new thing. I think there are several skills that you need to be a lawyer. We've touched on a few of them, but one of them is, especially going to solicitors, is being a bit of a team player, and being able to and a hard worker. So if you tell your sister to think about those two things, then she should be okay. Unfortunately, with applications to law firms, because you get so many people applying, you do have to do some of these, quite frankly, ridiculous tests where you have to do verbal reasoning, non-verbal reasoning, shapes tests, video interviews where you just video yourself. But it's because they can't interview all 2,000 people going for 20 spots. So be prepared for that. I would just say that all you can do is Google the same tests, look to see if there's anything else on the internet as to these tests, and just prepare as best you can.
Yeah, I remember when we spoke previously, you said one of the most important things was to keep going and not be resilient, really, and not let rejection get you down, because it is quite hard. It's quite tough out there.
Absolutely.
What non-law degrees do you recommend for a career in law?
Good question.
Other than economics.
Well, the great thing is you can do anything and then go into law. So I would say that it depends what you want to get out of your time if you decide not to do law, it really depends on what you want to get out of your time at university. If you want to study a real passion subject of yours, then go for it. My sister's actually a lawyer. She's older than me, but I say she copied me coming into law, but she did history of art, which is completely sort of different to law. But that's what she loved, and she did that at Leeds and had a great time. Lots of people who do law end up coming from history, English. They're sort of two quite typical ones. There are quite a lot of scientists who end up in law, and particularly they like going into intellectual property because of their sort of scientific background. As especially this time of the world of COVID and medical health, and medical devices and health advances, meaning that we have these vaccines and different drugs and etc. coming out to sort of help with COVID. It's an intellectual property team's dream to have all those, because they are the people who will put in place the protections for the recipes that these drug companies cook up. So a lot of scientists, so people who've done biology, chemistry, physics, they'll go into that type of law. But in terms of what to recommend, like I say, because you do the conversion course, it's completely up to you. I think the only advice I'd say is, if you are unsure on what you want to do in any career, I'd say make sure you do a solid degree at a good university, because I think that's the best way to cover your bases. If you know what you want to do, whether that be history of art to English to economics to law, then you might be able to, and you're really certain on that and you're certain your career path, then that's when you consider going to the best place for that subject in terms of university. But if you're unsure, I would definitely say, pick a solid degree at a good university as you can, and that's the best way to cover it.
Great. I've got a couple more questions here, which I'm going to combine actually. The first one's hopefully quite a brief answer. Where did you do your GDL? And the second is, at what point in the process of becoming a lawyer are you given the choice of what area of law that you want to specialise in?
Good questions. So I did the GDL at the University of Law in Bloomsbury in London. There are lots of places around the country you can do the GDL. Because I didn't have a training contract, I was able to choose. If you do have a training contract, a lot of firms will dictate that you have to do it at a certain centre, and usually they're probably, if it's a London law firm, it'll be in London. That being said, I think if you do have a reason, so if you're based in Bristol or sort of towards Leeds or anywhere like that, you might be able to sort of say, look, home's there. I'd rather live with my parents or rent a place there than rent in London, because obviously London's a very expensive place to live. But usually your firm will dictate where you go. But because I didn't have one, I did the University of Law in Bloomsbury. And then the second question, at what point in the process do you get a choice to specialise? So you essentially do your 2-year training contract, and at the end of that you qualify. Now, there are 2 stages. So once you finish your 2 years of training, you qualify no matter whether you stay in law or not. That's just the way it works. In terms of when you get a choice to specialize, it's at that stage. And usually that's because you apply for a job within the area of law you want to work in, and therefore the sort of team that you want to go into. Essentially, what happened to me was I did my first 6-month rotation in banking at Simmons. I enjoyed it, but I wasn't that sure about it. I then went into the dispute resolution team within the insurance and construction sector. And that's where I really I didn't think I was going to enjoy contentious work. I was slightly annoyed to be put into it, if I'm honest. And as it turns out, it's the area I've qualified into, and I absolutely, I do love what I do, which is, I never thought I'd say that really, but there we go. And it was at that stage that I was like, this is what I want to do. But obviously you still have to do your other rotations. So I think that the answer is you make your final decision at the end of your 2 years, but you can start to sculpt that choice as soon as you arrive at the firm. Now, if you've got a passion for financial products or employment law, or you just love tax, because everyone does, um, then you can get into your law firm and you can speak with your graduate recruitment and development team within your law firm and say, look, I'm really interested in this area of law. I would love to do a seat in it. So you can start making moves as soon as you arrive. And like I say, most law firms will do 4 rotations. So you have basically 4 opportunities to try and find something you enjoy. Now, if you get to the end of it and you're sort of thinking, this is not for me, or I haven't found anywhere, you can still make a choice to go and qualify into another area of law. Because one of the good things is that the English law firms are renowned for their training. So as long as you train at an English firm, you'll be guaranteed to be in a really good position for when you get to the end of your training contract. When you are deciding what area of law you want to go into, you can then make that decision, whether it be within the firm you are to an area you know about, or outside of the firm to an area you don't know about. So that's the sort of point. You sort of can start as soon as you start your career thinking about it, but when you actually finalize that, crystallize that choice, it will be sort of the end of your 2 years as a trainee and your training contract.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, I don't want to mention the COVID word, but I'm going to mention the COVID word. Do you think that COVID will have a long-term impact on the way that law is conducted?
Yes, that's a very well-worded question. Definitely on the way it will be conducted. I think one of the big things is that law was very old school before COVID came around. People loved hard copy documents. You were always doing things in person. Obviously, court cases were always done in various court buildings around the UK. And so and I'm sure everyone's aware of this because we're doing this talk virtually. What has happened is we've all been given a kick up the backside and told to get on with technology. So what we've seen is a large number of court cases be moved virtually, which has helped, especially with the minor sort of claims that are out there. It's helped deal with those quicker because you don't have the sort of effort of getting up, everyone going to the same building, and then the backlog that then comes with that. You can very much do it from home, dial in as and when, there's no travel time, etc. So I think that's been one of the big changes in the conduct, and it's sort of thing where I can see a lot of the smaller claims going to a virtual trial, but you'll still have the main big sort of claims that people work on within a court building, for example, in front of judges and with juries if you're on a criminal side. I suppose the other one is, and it sort of stems from this, is it's just the sort of, as I say, law was old school, and we've been given this sort of kick to become a more modern outfit, and everyone within the industry has. So you're kind of seeing a switch to less time poring over books within an office and late nights and all that sort of stuff, to a more modern way of working. And whilst I do think that an office will always be needed for law firms, I think it's definitely become, it's definitely got off its perch and become a better industry in terms of work-life balance, which typically it was very bad at. And you do hear sort of horror stories of people working all-nighters, and I have done one of those, and it's not fun. And now there's a little bit more of a sort of flexibility whereby, if you need to, you can work from home because everyone is contactable by, Zoom or Microsoft Teams. So I think that's the sort of 2 things that COVID have done in terms of how we conduct ourselves. We're still doing the same job, but it's just given us a bit more of a flexibility and freedom to do them, not all in one place, which I think has really helped. And the other thing is it's just helped the older generation of lawyer who, has done their training on, they were the people who would pour in the library over the books, to then they would use dictation software where basically they read into a microphone and their secretary would type it out for them. It's really kicked them into the modern era, because we had, before COVID, we have a bit of a divide between the younger workforce coming through who were tech savvy against the older generation of the workforce who weren't able to do this sort of stuff. And you were getting asked to do printing and set this sort of stuff where it takes 10 seconds for them to do, but by they spent a minute writing you an email, and then it takes you a minute to work out what they're saying to then do it. So it's helped efficiency from that side of view. So that's been the big help of COVID, and I think it's the same for most industries. Is it's just given us all a bit of a boost on the technology front.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I have a question here from Mr. Pullen, a challenging, almost interview-like question. What do the next 5 years look like for you, Charlie?
For me, well, fingers crossed, keep sort of improving and going at my job. Within my firm, there are sort of 3 different levels that I can reach before, 2 different levels from where I am before reaching the sort of top end partner, which is a long way off whether I get there or not. So the next 5 years for me will probably be along the lines of you sort of have to do your real hard graft in your first few years and as an associate within the department that you're in, and you have to learn what you do, what your sort of sector is, because as I say, I'd done 6 months before I started, and whilst you get to grips with the type of work you've got to do, there's so much within it that you just don't touch on. So your first couple of years, so I'm just coming out to 1 year qualified. So your first 2-3 years, they're where you really put in the hard work and you learn your basics, and you learn, you hone your technique, and you really go from there. And then the next stage from that is, hopefully in about 3 years time, you make the step up to what's called a supervising associate. And at that level, you then start to manage your own matters. So in my area, which is disputes, we deal with, as I mentioned earlier, people having fights with each other. So as a supervising associate, you would run the day-to-day works of so I'm in the insurance team and the construction team. So taking a construction case, a builder builds something wrong, and he, and the person who's employed him sues him saying you did this wrong. And we represent the builder. We'd sort of run his defense, and the day-to-day, there's lots of different steps you take during a claim before you get to court. So you'd be running the day-to-day activities on a matter like that. So that's the sort of the next stage, and you do that for another 3 years, and then you get to the next level, which is you get onto a managing associate, which is your route to partner. And then it's probably sort of 3 or 4 years after that before you can think about reaching the sort of the lower end of the top end, and then you sort of build your practice within that. So yeah, the next 5 years probably looks like that. I hope that I'll be able to spend at least some of that time going in-house, and what that means is it's essentially a bit like I did with my secondment as a trainee. So you spend a period of time within a client's legal team. So for me, that'll probably be spending some time with an insurer such as AIG or QBE, sort of 2 quite well-known insurers. And there you sort of sit in their legal function and you deal with claims coming in. So if someone has an insurance policy and they would like their insurer to pay for something that's gone wrong, usually a claims handler will deal with the sort of pretty straightforward ones, and anything that's got a little bit more of a technical aspect to it, they would then get escalated to the legal team to review the documents and then go from there. And if it's a really big claim, you would then send that back to Simmons and use the sort of all the lawyers there to work on the matter. So hopefully maybe a 9-month sort of stint in-house would be great for my experience. But yeah, for me, that's probably the next 5 years, which, having said that, sounds incredibly boring, but fingers crossed there are some interesting cases within that keeps it interesting.
Well, at least you've got a plan. I think that's a very positive thing. I think, it's great that you've come back to talk to us today. I'm interested to know, it's great when someone from the network gives back, and I'm interested to know how you use the Radley network to help form your career choices.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose this is kind of how I'm back here now in some respects. So I have used the Radley network. It was very helpful in me getting my career in law off the ground. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't get my training contract when I was on the GDL, and I'd sent roughly about sort of 25 to 30 applications in that year, and I just hadn't had any success getting over the line. I've had interviews, I'd had fine around staff, but I just wasn't getting over the line. And actually, I was fortunate that I knew another Radleyan who was about 4 or 5 years older than me. He was in asocial, a guy called Ed Ford, who is now a senior associate at a law firm called Travers Smith. And he very kindly had a coffee with me one day in London when I was on the GDL. And he just kind of said to me, look, don't worry about it. You'll be sat here in a year's time talking to me and being like, I don't know what I was worried about. And then very kindly just gave me some really good advice on how to tailor my application, on how to sort of stick at it, things to think about when I went for interviews, good ideas for, once I'd finished the GDL, what experience I could get after that, one of which being going to become a paralegal. So, I suppose that's how I kind of used the Radley network. And, I reached out to people who were lawyers. And then, funny enough, there was a breakfast in London, I think 2 years ago now, where I went along and attended, and there was someone in a similar position that I was in when I was talking to Ed, all those years ago, who wanted a few bits of advice that I tried to give him, and hopefully it worked. And we ended up actually linking up for a coffee a few weeks later, just to sort of run through a few things. And he ended up on a VAT scheme at Simmons and Simmons. So that's all his work, not mine, I can assure you that. But it was, it's a great thing to be able to use the Radley network. And I think whilst, I can give an example of how it's helped me get to where I am now, I think it will be incredibly beneficial when you get further on. And just as a little, anecdote on networks, it does help to sort of keep in touch with people and stay on top of it. And funnily enough, my boss, a guy called James Pollock, his best man was Simon Barlas, who I believe is still a French teacher at Radley. And when he found this out, I think he asked me a few questions on Mr. Barlas, and he'd been my sub tutor when I was in F Social for 3 years. Great man. And I think as soon as I said he was my French teacher as well, I sort of, I found myself in a very sort of lucky position that he wasn't he has a sort of a bit of a reputation for testing new trainees when they come in the department. And I immediately found myself in a bit of a better position. So, that's the sort of thing, the Radley network is a great thing to use, even if it's not directly within law. Just don't be afraid to leverage it to help you.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Charlie. That was incredibly informative, a great insight into the world of law for those who are considering that path. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your, no doubt, very busy day to come and talk to us. So if there are any other career paths that any of you want to hear about as part of this Beyond Radley Careers programme, then please do feel free to get in touch with me directly, and I will try and find speakers from the network. And on that note, before we go, I'd briefly like to tell you about the 2 other careers events that we are hosting this week. So on Wednesday, we have Tom Cornell, who's going to talk to you about his career as part of a global brand at JCB, what it's like working for a global brand and the benefits of doing so. And on Friday, Jamie Campbell, producer of popular Netflix series Sex Education, will come to talk to us about a career in TV production. So thank you all so much for attending. We look forward to seeing you at our next Beyond Radley Careers talk. Thank you very much. And thank you, Charlie.
No worries. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.